Hi, everyone. My name is Sandy Kruse of Sandy K Nutrition Health and Lifestyle Queen podcast. And we are live at the Biohacking Congress in Miami, where there are just so many amazing exhibitors and lectures and so many people who are like-minded who just want to share their learnings. And today I have Dr. Lara Varden. I got it right?
Yes, you did.
I did.
Thank
Of
you.
the DNA company. And we are going to talk all about her experience, how the DNA company is different, and so much more. So I would love to start with your background, how you got into genetics. For anybody who's listening, it's genetics done differently is the way that I would describe the DNA company. So I'm going to let you describe your background, how you got into all of this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And I thank all of you watchers and listeners out there taking the time to listen in on our conversation. I really appreciate it. So, first of all, my credentials are a little bit of a mouthful, but I am a functional genomics and holistic health practitioner. I'm an in-house clinician for the DNA company, but I'm also co-founder and CEO of my own company called Sacred Genomics. And I am not a medical doctor. I'm actually a PhD. I'm a scientist. I have specialties in cellular biology, molecular genetics, neuroscience, and even biomedical engineering. I actually did my focus on low back pain, degenerative disc disease, and regenerative strategies for those issues. I actually have a degree and background in education. My first degree was actually in education in elementary and special ed, and kind of worked my way into teaching for the state of New York, where I'm from, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed the teaching aspect. It's actually in my genes.
I love that.
My mother was a teacher and principal of a school, and actually right now at age 80, she's principal of a Catholic school in the Phoenix area.
At age 80? I'd love to hear that.
Yes, actually, she just took the job this past April.
Good for her.
She is amazing.
Vibrant.
You bet.
Yes.
You talk about a force of nature. And she's got more energy than people 30 years her junior.
I love that.
So, well, yeah, we'll get into that in a minute.
But I mean,
So-
you, Dr. Lara and I were talking earlier. We have definitely one similarity, and that is that we went back to school a little bit later. Like we did our degrees.
Yes.
And then we went back to school later. So maybe tell us about that.
Well, the whole precipitate event that catalyzed that move was a car accident. One of those pivotal times in my life that really changed the trajectory of my path that I didn't appreciate so much at the time, but looking back on it now, I find it to be an event that I am so incredibly grateful for. And so what ended up happening? Well, first of all, I have always been very athletic. Into every sport, you name it, I did it. Gymnastics, track, volleyball. My favorite, figure skating.
Oh, wow.
Actually, I became a professional figure skater as I was moving up and going to university and became a teacher. So I continued skating. I was working for the state of New York, had my kids. They were about 7, 10 at the time. And we went hiking, did a lot of things together. Then one day, we were driving home from going shopping at the store. You know how they say most accidents happen within a mile of your house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was one of those. We were sitting at a stop sign, and my husband was driving. I was in the passenger seat, turned talking to him, and we got rear-ended by a 3/4-ton pickup truck with a snowplow.
Oh, that's tragic.
I'll tell you, driving the Suburban saved our lives. The reconstruction artist said that if we had been in a compact car, we would have been dead.
Yes.
So everything happens for a reason.
I agree with that.
Absolutely. And Unfortunately, it did happen that I had to go through lots of challenges because I went from running 5 miles every day and being as active as I was to being in a wheelchair and on a lot of medications. Because during that time in the early 2000s, that's when a lot of the narcotics were being pushed.
Oh, yes.
I was just following doctors' prescription orders and, on the full regimen. I mean, I was a walking pharmacy. Half the medications, were pain medications and OxyContin and MS Contin and hydrocodone APAP and tramadol and Neurontin and all this other stuff. The other half were to cover the symptoms or the side effects from the first half. I mean, it was horrible, but I was just in so much pain.
You didn't have the option. There weren't a lot of options.
No. There was nobody telling me that there were any other options, and that's what was sad. So it was unfortunate that in that pain, and my husband was injured too, but thankfully not quite as bad, but still, we were both in pretty bad shape. But it was very difficult because the pain was so bad that even when the kids went to hug me, I would just wince and cry. And of course, their mom, they loved me, they felt so bad, they were afraid to touch me. It just broke my heart.
It's horrible.
Between that emotional, mental stress, the depression, the medications, the brain fog, the pain, it got to a point where I thought to myself, if I have to live like this the rest of my life, I don't want the rest of my life. And
how long were you like that?
Oh gosh.
Because I know obviously, look at you now, right?
Yes.
Look at you now. But you must have had a few years.
Well, it was 6 years before I had my first open back surgery. And it was something that my neurosurgeon, he was like, yeah, we're not going to do surgery until you're begging for it. And, because he didn't want to necessarily put me through that and maybe hoping I would somehow miraculously, I don't know. Like I said, I was in such a fog. I was just like, okay. So I went through a lot of physical therapy, water therapy, acupuncture, doing massage therapy. I mean, you name it. It's like I would do it. I still was not. I'd get better a little bit, but it really was not healing me.
So what changed? What helped you? You had the surgery.
Yes.
And then what actually was a pivotal point in your recovery?
Well, I did make steps forward.
So baby steps.
Okay. So the surgeries, they did help because I've actually had 2 open back surgeries. I've got cages, metal rods, fusions, the whole bit.
Wow.
So those did help some. Water therapy was wonderful. And I will tell you, water is such an incredible healing medium.
Yeah.
I also kind of went on my own as far as, trying to work through diet. Of course, I couldn't move very well. It's not like exercise, did very much. I could do the therapy in the water, which again, I could do more movement. So that definitely helped. So it was baby steps. I graduated from a wheelchair to a cane. But it was still a lot of medications. And it got to a point being on that hamster wheel. I was like, yeah, I can't keep going like this. And I was just like, I'm going to have to take it upon myself to heal us, to figure this out. So during this time, of course, the kids are growing up.
Yeah.
My daughter went to college. My son ended up getting accepted into an early college placement program at Clarkson University, where he skipped his senior year of high school. And at 16 years old, he started his freshman year of college. Well, of course, that was 2 hours away. And I was like, yeah, I want to be a little closer. My husband was like, okay, so we have an empty nest a year early. What do you want to do now? I said, I want to go back to school and become a doctor to fix us. It's like, okay.
Nice.
So we moved to where my son was going to university because there's 4 universities in that area.
Yeah.
I went to one of the state university colleges of New York, and I enrolled because I found out that to become a medical doctor, you have to have your prerequisites done within 7 to 9 years of medical training. Well, mine were like 20 years old. And it was something that I never took a lot of the higher science courses. So I'm like, okay, not a problem, I'll do this. Because one thing about me is I am determined.
Yeah.
It's like when I put my mind on something, I give 110%, to the point of like pushing myself too much. So I enrolled in school, getting the prerequisites done. Well, 3.5 years in, busting my butt, of course, sitting in lecture halls, sitting in front of the computer, doing all that, not so good for the back.
Yeah.
And being in the lab, of course, I had my cane, but I'm working with a lot of chemicals. Because of the neuropathy and the radiculopathy, my legs would give out. I'd go to take a step, I would just collapse in the lab. That got dangerous. Because again, working with all those chemicals and with this biological material, they ended up having to call the emergency squad. I'd have to be brought to the emergency room, given shots of Vistaril, Toradol to get me out of that pain cycle. I mean, and it got more frequent to the point where 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the end of this semester, the semester before I was supposed to graduate, my nurse surgeon, I had to go in and see her. And she said, Lara, she said, you can't keep going on like this. She said, if you do, you're going to be paralyzed from your waist down, and another surgery is not going to work.
Right.
She said, I'm medically withdrawing you from school.
Oh.
What?
So
3.5 years of that work, of my time, of my energy,
right.
rug being pulled right out from under me. I was absolutely bawling in that room. I don't know if it was more so from the pain I was in or from the fact that what I was working so hard to solve and do was being taken away. She said to me, you need to stop and you need to go heal yourself. I didn't realize until later that those were probably one of the most prophetic words ever said to me.
Yeah.
Because that is exactly what I did.
Nice.
So the pivotal moment that really triggered my healing journey is we had to pack up all of our stuff and move back home like 2 hours away because they didn't have the water therapy in the town that we were living in where the university was. So we moved in with my daughter for a short time so I could do water therapy. Well, she had given me a book by Dolores Cannon, who had quantum healing hypnosis theory.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Laura, I just interviewed Julia Cannon, her daughter.
Her daughter, yes. I had my session with Diane Morrison, one of the top people. Love them.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I know we're supposed to be talking about the DNA company here.
And we will.
And we'll get to that. But that's amazing because you've read Julia's book.
Yes, of course I have. And I've read all of her mother's books.
Yes.
The one that I read that was that, 3 waves of volunteers in the new earth. My daughter gave me the book. She's like, Mom, you got to read this book.
Oh, I got to read that one now.
Do you know, I had read that the fall, like the month before I got medically withdrawn from school. I'm within 30 seconds of me finishing the book, I get a phone call from my daughter. She's like, Mom, you just finished the book, didn't you? I'm like, how did you know? She said,
wow.
I just knew. My daughter and I are like this.
Yes.
Very tightly connected.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So that's amazing because I am a very big believer that we cannot just heal ourselves using one modality.
Right.
Okay. There's so many complicated pieces to our puzzle, our healing puzzle.
Yes.
So, sorry, go ahead.
You are
I was just like, wow. Okay.
Yes.
It's just like, no thyroid, speaking your truth. And look what I'm doing right now. I'm a podcaster.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm speaking on topics that are very passionate for me to speak on.
Yes.
So Okay, continue.
Oh,
I love it. I love it.
This is wonderful.
Yes.
So what ended up happening is, okay, I was medically withdrawn and left school end of November.
Yeah.
So here it is March, beginning of March of the following year. And this is now 2015. I made an appointment with Diane Morrison, who is one of the top people for
Julia.
You bet.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful soul. Love her. I walked into that session. 3 hours later, I walked out, never used my cane again, and I got off all of my medication that I had been on for 14 years in 1 month.
Okay.
Now,
That's powerful. And I'm going to tell you something
bet.
after you're finished. Sorry.
Oh, no,
because
you're
I'm
fine.
just so amazed that you said Dolores Cannon. So go on. And that you're able to kind of release
yes,
the suffering and the pain that because you're listening to what your body's actually telling you.
that session, and Diane, all of them even say that. It is not them doing it. They are just the conduit. They only do about 5% to facilitate that connection to our higher selves.
Yes.
To source of all that is, that has infinite wisdom, power, everything. I was able to get in touch with my higher self to have self-healing. Now, granted, it was not 100%, but that was for a reason. Because again, remember I told you, when I do something, I do it 110%, I push and push and push. My higher self knows me. My guides know me a lot better.
Yeah.
And they know what I need better than I do. And they knew that I needed a reminder to not push so hard, that I needed to find balance, that I needed to be able to stop and slow down. Also, for me to learn other modalities, for me to experience other healing ways, other information, because I'm one where I need to experience it, try it out myself, so I can therefore teach it to others. The wounded healer. And so that was my journey. I never went into past lives or, a somnambulistic state. I was very aware the whole time. But again, that was for a purpose. I didn't need to do that. It was a matter of the healing.
Right.
So I left there just absolutely amazed. My husband had a session as well, also had healing. My daughter had a session. I mean, it was just a catalytic moment. So I moved from there, re-enrolled in school, started up again that following fall because I had to retake that semester I lost. Graduated the following year, summa cum laude with my biochemistry biology pre-med degree. And I was like, okay, yeah, med school, very expensive. At this time, my son had already graduated. My daughter was in college because she was kind of back and forth, but back in college. And I was like, and me in college. I was like, okay, so not getting any younger, and I'm certainly not getting any richer. How am I going to do med school? Well, my last year and a half, I had actually done research, like benchtop research. I published a couple of papers on water toxicology. I worked in a biophysical chemistry lab. Actually, I managed it. A fantastic advisor. And his focus on ferritin, so I've done work with that. And he was like, Lara, he said, well, why don't you just get your PhD? I was like, okay, how much is that going to cost? He said, nothing. I'm like, what? What do you mean, nothing? Tell me more. He's like, yeah, in the sciences that we do, he said, for a PhD, if you get a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship, not only do they waive your tuition, they pay you a stipend. So they'll pay you to get your PhD. I'm like,
Nice.
sold.
Yeah, sold.
Yes, I can do
Yeah.
that. That is fantastic because I really fell in love with research. So again, the 4 universities right there, my son had graduated from one. Well, before he graduated and when I was in school, they have an agreement between the 4 universities that you can cross-register and take courses at one of the other universities. So I ended up cross-registering and taking a class, Stem Cells and Regenerative Medicine, with my son. We took the class together. Loved it. I mean, loved it.
Okay, is this where the next part of the story comes in?
Yeah. And what leads me into getting into the DNA company. So what ended up happening is that I really enjoyed the class, and the professor happened to be an endowed chair for the department, and his research was on low back pain and spine work. I was like, how serendipitous.
Yes, yes.
And I was like his favorite student. So it ended up where actually that was the only university I applied to, got in immediately with a teaching assistantship, and they even let me choose the course I got to teach, and I chose anatomy and physiology.
Right.
And because we have a health sciences department, we had a whole cadaver lab. I got to teach in the cadaver lab. Amazing. I absolutely fell in love with the amazingness of the human body, of how it all works. I took genetics courses. I focused on, like I said, cellular biology, molecular genetics. I mean, it just absolutely fascinated me. It was like a kid in a candy store. I could not get enough.
Yes.
And so I, of course, did my research on low back pain and regenerative strategies. And lo and behold, this is the time of the pandemic. What ended up happening is my first couple of years, I had the TA-ship, but then I applied for a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. I ended up getting that, so I switched over to do that as my my stipend focus. I also got accepted at an advanced research training program with Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole. That is an amazing research facility, and actually 58 Nobel Prize winners have come from there, have either taught there, been students, or have done research there. Just amazing. So again, deepening my love for genes, genetic expression, how it all works. So I graduate, and I ended up getting hired as an adjunct professor with Clarkson. But I do want to say, during the pandemic, I did have to obviously take a little time away from the lab because they had to close it down.
Yep.
Cellular work, couldn't do it. So I spent that time writing a book chapter, publishing some more papers, and I took advantage of the fact of being home, that I enjoyed nature out in the Adirondack Mountains and climbed 38 mountains that year.
Wow, nice.
So you consider going from the state I was in to being able to be mobile enough to climb 38 mountains in the high peaks.
It's amazing.
And being out in nature, what an amazing thing. It's so rejuvenating, and being in touch with everything.
What I love when I'm listening to all of this is that you're a scientist, but you understand that wellness can never be about science alone. Right?
Yeah.
There's the esoteric
Yes.
side to our wellness. Thus, Dolores Cannon. You know, I find it amazing because there's not, in our world, often we see a very divisive side to science versus the unexplainable or the
Right.
esoteric. I've always said that you have to blend all modalities, and you're a scientist that does just that.
Exactly. And this is something that I felt is part of my mission.
Yeah.
That taking the science, that left brain, that analytical aspect, and looking at the metaphysical, that right brain, the creativity, the tapping into all that is, and bridging the two.
Yes.
Because I will tell you, it actually is all science. We just don't have the devices to be able to measure all of it.
Prove it.
Exactly.
Everybody wants to see proof.
Yeah.
And I will say, Laura, because, we have a lot of, just by chatting, we have so many similarities, but for every single study, almost every single study out there that proves one thing, I can almost find another one to disprove it.
Exactly.
So science is important. We've come such a long way, and we're going to talk about epigenetics and genomics and where that comes into play in our wellness, but it's not the only thing.
That's right.
It's not the only thing. And you can't only believe in the science. And often we have to just pick a side. Right?
Well,
don't you think about it? But if you look at all the studies that are there, who's doing it, and who's funding it, and that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, yeah. There's definitely those limitations. And as a scientist, you are definitely aware of limitations and all the nuances and who gets funded. And, not all of the research we would want to do and can do gets done because there's the lack of funding, because of the person holding the purse strings. And especially over the last handful of years, we need to be careful about not making science a religion. Science should always be questioned. That's what science is about. That's how we push forward, is that we constantly question the null hypothesis. It's like we are trying to prove it wrong until we can't. And then it becomes proof. But even then, there's always limitations in a scientific experiment. But there's definitely room for all of it.
Yeah.
So
I have to now ask, let's get into the DNA company.
Yes.
Because I've actually had my genetics done. I've had my genetics done by many different genetic companies. I know what SNPs I carry. Maybe, explain what a SNP is.
Okay. So
to start, because that's something that's very big. And I think it probably began with 23andMe, correct me if I'm wrong.
Where it probably the most well known.
Yes, more to the general public.
Right.
But now there's more and more genetics companies that are coming into play. And it's more about how, because one gene doesn't do one thing.
That's right.
Right? So maybe get into some of that.
Okay, so first of all, talking about SNPs. So when we're talking about genes, first of all, we all have 23 sets of chromosomes, okay? One set from mom, one set from dad. And within those chromosomes that are wound nice and tightly, we have genes, okay? These genes end up making proteins. Well, in the genes, you can think of them like long paragraphs or information, okay? And a SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism, meaning that one nucleotide of the four, isn't it amazing how there's just 4 nucleotides that make up our entire DNA? So cool. So of our 4 nucleotides, so adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, okay? So of our 4 nucleotides, the way that they are set, they pair off. The A and the T pair, the C and the G pair. So sometimes instead of an A, it'll be a C, okay? That is a single nucleotide, poly meaning a change, morphism of change.
Right.
So when that happens, it can actually change the amino acid that is displayed, and in which case can change how the protein is expressed. Sometimes it doesn't do anything.
Right.
Sometimes it does.
Right.
That's why there are specific sites and changes where they have the RSID numbers, that's very specific location on the genome.
The RS, and then you'll get
the numbers. Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because they're very specific, just like the MTHFR, there's actually a couple specific sites. One ends in 133, the other one in 113.
Yes.
So, because those, they have found when there are changes, that it changes the enzyme's ability to do its job efficiently.
Right.
Okay. So, sorry, a little bit more longer-winded.
No, that's okay. That's okay, because high level understanding I think is important for genetics because it's pretty complicated stuff.
Right. So really it's
Maybe not for
the
you,
word.
but for,
No. Okay, so really
although I've done a lot of genetics, but still, I mean, I'm
Right.
very like, give me the Coles notes. I get
Right.
the Coles notes. But so there's some that are very important to look at, right? Like MTHFR, CompT, right? Like, why is that? Is it because just more we just know more about them?
We do know more about
Okay.
it. It has been studied enough to look at its functionality, what the pathways are, what it's doing.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are several genes that have a little bit of information and we're still learning more, but those generally have the most research on them. But a way to look at it, you have a recipe.
Okay.
So you have a teaspoon of salt and, a cup of sugar and a cup of, whatever the case may be. So if there is a change, say we change the 1 teaspoon of salt to 1 tablespoon of salt, that's going to change that recipe quite a bit.
Right.
So this is the type of thing that happens in your genes when there's a little bit of a change. There's a change in the recipe.
Oh, very cool way of explaining it. Great analogy. I like that.
So,
But also, what we do day to day is what can really make that express
differently.
right.
Okay, so let's use the recipe analogy again.
Yeah.
So we have a recipe. It's written that way. All good.
Okay.
But instead of, say you're doing some sort of a beef stroganoff or something like that, okay? There's going to be a big difference if you use these CAFO cows that are full of hormones and toxins and that, as compared to using grass-fed and finished beef. And the vegetables that you're using, very different if you just get conventional, off-the-shelf produce as compared if it's out of your own garden and organic. The flavor profile, way different. So same recipe, same ingredients, different quality of ingredients. Your end product is going to be quite different.
I love that. That's such a great way of explaining it. That's why you're an educator, right? That's why you're an educator. I love that. Okay, so what you're saying now we've got the recipe. We understand that what we do day-to-day life can alter the recipe, the flavor, all of that. So where does it come in where one gene can do so many different things in the body and be responsible for so many different things?
Okay, so
Because it gets really complicated there, right?
Yeah, it can.
But I know you're good at explaining, so let's hear it. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, genes do not exist in a vacuum. Okay, they do interact with other genes.
Yes.
And the proteins that are made from these genes also have different jobs. They can be part of a larger complex and do a particular job, or based on other factors that may attach to them, they'll do a different job.
Yes.
Form equals function. Okay? So with all of these types of genes, they also work together like players on a team. Okay? Yes, you have individual players. Yes, some of them are stronger, some of them are weaker. But you can't play the game with just one player. You have to see the whole team in order to play the game. So, there are some genes, those proteins, that may pick up the slack for weaker ones, but you still have to deal with what they're doing, those weaker ones. And there are things epigenetically that we can do to help support and make that gene work more optimally. One of the ways that I like to explain this to people is that, first of all, a gene, you can't flip a switch that's not there. So if you don't have the gene, obviously you can't turn it on.
You can't do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for most genes, you have them. It's just that they may be shorter or limited in their capacity. So think of a dimmer switch. Okay? So you can move that dimmer switch up and down, but within the confines that you're given, the confines of those genes. So you can turn it up, turn it down.
Yeah.
But you're limited there.
Right.
Say another person, same gene, but theirs is more optimal. They have a larger area to work with. So they can attenuate and move that dimmer switch a wider range. Okay?
So there is no, this is the thing, we should clarify this. There isn't necessarily a good or a bad gene.
Correct.
It's how does the whole picture look together, right?
Yes.
It's just like CompT. So I know I'm a CompT GG,
Right.
right? But what am I doing to support that? Right? Because
Right.
it can be good or bad depending on everything else that I have within my genetics and how I'm supporting the whole picture. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Or-
absolutely.
okay.
And see, the thing is that when we're talking about these genes working together and good and bad, you're right. It's not a matter of good and bad. It just is. Because, for example, in our mood and behavior profile, we look at your dopamine receptors, the DRD2 gene.
And I run out of my dopamine, right? Like I don't have enough if I'm a CompT GG, I think.
Well, okay, wait. So
Okay.
the way that COMT works in mood and behavior is through the clearance of the neurotransmitters. COMT is the like the LeBron James on the basketball team. The basketball is your methyl group. It's being passed from player to
Yes.
player.
Yes.
It gets to COMT, the LeBron James, he's the one who dunks the ball. So COMT actually puts the methyl group onto the substrate, whether it is a neurotransmitter, whether it is a hormone metabolite, whether it's a toxin in the body.
Yes.
And it does that to put it through your phase 2 detoxification system for clearance. Okay? That's what it does. It clears your dopamine neurotransmitters. It clears the
Yes,
serotonin.
okay.
So, in your case, I believe GG is fast.
Yeah, Val or whatever, right? Val.
Okay, that's valine. It's the valine.
Yeah.
That's the particular amino acid thing. So,
Yes.
but it's knowing the functionality. If it's fast, if it's slow, is it a slow clearance? Is it a fast clearance? Is it an average clearance? See, and this is something if you did our test, I could actually take a look.
I
and
did.
See. Oh, you
did.
do have?
I did
Oh,
do it.
we are gonna have to
Oh,
dive
yeah.
into that.
I did do
Okay.
it. And I did. And I think from what I recall, because remember, I've done a lot of
right.
different tests. But there's something in my genetics about B12 and methylation.
Okay.
And I must support that whole methylation
Pathway.
Does that make sense?
So diving into the methylation pathway, it's not just about the MTHFR gene. That has become like the sweetheart gene, the only thing, if I have that, then I need methylfolate. No.
Okay.
There's more to it than that. There's actually more genes in the pathway that start getting a little more nuanced that tell you, okay, well, if your MTHFR gene is suboptimal, and remember you have 2 that we look at,
Okay, yeah.
So say both of them are suboptimal. That doesn't mean that you have to jump to methylfolate. Yes, you will need to supplement with folate in some way. I prefer to push toward whole foods first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beef liver capsules.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't really like beef liver.
I got those in my pantry.
Yeah. Bee pollen. Nutritional yeast. A lot of different things. Very
There's
rich in B
options.
vitamins. You bet.
Yeah.
So, yes, you need to have folate. But
what about
form?
B12?
Oh, we'll get to that in a
Okay,
second.
okay.
So, because your 2 major B vitamins for the methylation pathways, B9 and B12. Your B9 is folate, B12 is cobalamin.
Got it.
Okay, so we need to look at the next gene in that pathway, which is SHMT1. SHMT1 takes methyl groups from the cytosol of the cell and puts it into the nucleus, and that helps with DNA silencing and so on and so forth. Very important. If that is suboptimal, it means that there's not good transfer of that methyl group. And if you take a methylfolate, you could actually overmethylate yourself. And this would look like maybe you are starting to take methylfolate, and you may feel good at first for a little bit.
Yeah.
A few weeks in or so, all of a sudden you start feeling anxiety. You're getting headaches. You're just not feeling right.
Yeah.
Because you're overmethylating yourself.
Overdoing, because methylation is never about pushing the needle too far. It's always about, you kind of want to be right in the middle.
Very
right?
tightly regulated.
Yeah.
And methyl groups are very important as they are shifted. It's like a baton pass from group to group, even changing the type of amino acid that you happen to have. That works in, like the SAMe, which is the, major methyl donor, okay? And that works more in the pathway of the B12. But back to the folate. So, okay, if you can't take methylfolate, what do you take? Well, you take adenosylfolate, but it's not in that particular form in, or the name in the supplement. It's actually called folinic acid.
Not folic.
No, that is synthetic, and that is a
Yes.
problem. Dr. Ben Lynch has done extensive
I have his
research.
book. I have his
I
book.
love Dirty
Yes.
Genes, wonderful.
Yes.
But he actually has done a lot of research in this since like 2011. He actually has a paper and information that you can go to. You can Google like folic acid side effects, Dr. Lynch, and he actually shows all of the studies why folic acid is not good to supplement
Okay,
with.
I have a question.
Yes.
Same thing with B12. There's like the cyanocobalamin or whatever.
Cyanocobalamin,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All of those forms are they just the cheap forms? Because you see them a lot of times in the cheap,
Right.
drugstore brands that are not really. Why?
Well,
Why? When we
yeah,
know.
it is. I know. Well, because it does come down to money at some times. And when you're looking at the B12, okay, the two genes that we're looking at to determine the form of cobalamin you should take is your MTR and your MTRR. If your MTR is suboptimal, you are not a very good candidate for taking methylcobalamin, because again, overmethylation, there could be some issues. You should be taking adenosylcobalamin.
Right.
And the final piece to that is looking at the FUT2 gene, that's FUT2.
Okay.
That gene actually produces a protein that transports B12 from the gut into the bloodstream. If you're suboptimal on that, you could be eating foods rich in B vitamins, but you're not absorbing it very well.
Right.
So if your FUT2 gene is suboptimal, you really should be taking a sublingual form.
And also B vitamins, because I know a lot about nutraceuticals. Like they're water soluble, so they can come
Flush
in
out.
and out.
Oh, yeah.
And stress. I actually did a post quite a while ago about how you can burn through your Bs pretty quickly when you're high stress, right?
Oh yeah, that magnesium.
And
Magnesium is
yes.
when you're stressed, that just gets
Oh my
eaten
gosh.
up. Yeah.
So, okay, we need to kind of clarify or make it easy. And I think the DNA company does that, because you guys do. I did see it's like this beautiful format that you do explain. There's also like a video portion. So because it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, it can
And
be.
a lot of times people find genetics, epigenetics, genomics confusing. And a lot of times people just don't even want to go there. So what's the best way for somebody to get started? They're not scientists.
Right. To get started,
Yeah.
have a test.
Okay.
First of all, have the test.
Yeah.
And the nice thing with our reports is that we do lay it out. You have your own little gene cast.
Yes.
Where we walk you through, this is your variant, this is what it means. There's a video that Kashif, our co-founder, has recorded where he talks about, okay, here's this system. This is how we look at it. This is what we're looking for. And then in each of your reports, you have a breakdown of the system and saying how it is important, the functionality of it. And then it actually tells you for each gene, the variant, what it does, whether it's fast, it's slow, it does this and that. And then we even give recommendations. What
Yes.
supplements would be good, how, what lifestyle changes you should be doing, what you should avoid. But even then, it is only based on your genetic profile.
Okay.
It doesn't take into account your current lifestyle. What are you currently eating? What traumas have you been dealing with? What toxic load are you currently experiencing? Okay. Now, yes, the DNA reports in and of themselves can take you so far. And we also have on our website and on our YouTube channel and Instagram, we have videos, webinars, actually several. I recently hosted a lot doing on women's health, hormones.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, just fantastic. Kashif has done a tremendous amount.
He's done a lot.
A great, fantastic information, that gives you more insight. So, there's still a lot that can be done even if you don't do one of the programs. If you do want to be taken through your reports with someone like me to really break it down, to explain it, to ask all those questions that are so important in your life, to take that person, you, where you are, and then start digging deeper to solve these issues, then we've got a lot of different programs available that people can do. We also have a subscription program for coaching. We have a lot of different things, and we have expanded with new testing. We are now doing GPX testing for pharmacogenetics, where we're looking at medications, whether this is good for you, whether it's not.
Oh, that's so big.
Yes. So we really want to, round out, because we're also doing, we also have a microbiome testing. We have the DNA aging, where we've teamed up with Age Rate to do your biological aging through DNA methylation.
Mm-hmm.
So, really, we also do a 44 venipuncture blood test. We have serum testing. We are really expanding to offer a full plethora of in-house work to really give you everything that you need.
I like that because people will find it, like people who are not in this industry that we're in of wellness,
Right.
but they want to be well and they want to learn how to age better. And so you guys have made it easier for people, which is what I like. And I have to go back to that point about drug interactions with your genetics. That's so important because I just have to note this. I know that I have a predisposition to have myopathy from statins. What's one of the biggest prescribed drugs in the top 10?
Yeah.
Statins. My mother, who I obviously got this from, did go on a statin for 1 month, couldn't move her hands, but had no idea why until she said, I'm getting off this.
Yeah.
Right? So this is why it's so important, because it's not anti-pharmaceuticals. It's saying there could be other options, or maybe this particular pharmaceutical drug is not right, or maybe you need CoQ10 with the statin.
Well, yeah, you should do that anyway.
You should do that anyway.
Depletes your CoQ10.
Yes. But I'm just
Right.
saying you educate in this manner, and it's beautiful. So I just want to note, don't be afraid of genetics. Please, people,
No.
don't be afraid. You just hear how simple she made it sound, right? Okay, give us, because we have to wrap up, give us your website and where we can find you.
Okay. So for the DNA company, it is thednacompany.com. We also have our YouTube channel. Just do a search on the DNA Company. Also for our podcast, it's called The DNA Talks Podcast. We just rebranded from our previous Unpilled podcast, but they are linked together. Also, my Instagram is Dr. Varden, that's VARDEN official. And our Instagram for the DNA company is at the DNA Co.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Oh, this
I
has
loved
been
our chat.
wonderful.
We could have probably talked for at least another hour or two.
At least.
So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time for listening, and I hope to see you soon.